Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our, I think it is our fourth Phase 2 awardee workshop. And today we're going to be talking about navigating Phase 3 contracting. So I know that is an interesting topic to all of you. Some of you have had a lot of success, and we're going to have some of those successful awardees speak today. So we're happy to be able to have everyone here for that. So we have a very full agenda. I know I'm getting us started a little late because I was having a little trouble getting in. But we are going to start with the legal side of things. And so we're going to hear from Mike Dobbs, who is our Deputy Chief Counsel at the Office of Science. And he's going to be followed by Manny Oliver, who's going to talk a little bit about the challenges in interpreting what Mike presents. And then we're going to start hearing from our different awardees that have received Phase 3s. So we're going to hear from Nettle and the Office of Electricity. We're going to hear from Argonne National Lab, and we're going to hear from NNSA. And then at the close, we're going to introduce DOD. We are going to hear from Navy and about some success that was done by NIOWAVE in using their DOE award for a Navy Phase 3. I'm going to open the floor at the end. I have 3 other Phase 3 awardees who are going to speak from 3 different companies about their engagement and some of the challenges they faced and some of the recommendations that they would make. And then finally, Phase 1 or Phase 2, you are going to need to address that. So without taking up any further time, I am going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn it over to you, Mike. So I am very pleased that we have Mike Dobbs here. Again, he is from the Office of Science, our Deputy Chief Counsel, and he's going to give us some of the legal framework for Phase 3. Mike?
Thank you. Hopefully everybody can see my screen okay. First off, I have to apologize if there's any background noises. I'm actually at a hotel at a conference for laboratories, so it was a great opportunity to ask some of the laboratory general counsels about Phase 3s. I think there's some opportunity for improvement there, but I am held up at a hotel here, and sorry for the noises in the background, but I wanted to really be a part of this. I'm super excited to see us talk more about Phase 3. As I mentioned, there's some confusion. Where I fit in all this, my office is responsible for all the SBIR, SCTR awards. If you've been on any of the IP days that we have, you may have seen me talk about general patent and data rights. Today is a little bit scary for me because it's actually a new topic, one that we haven't done before, but an important topic. Another part of my office, we touched 11 of the 17 national laboratories and just tech transfer, subcontracting general IP support of the laboratories as well. So it's kind of good to be on both sides of this, as well as the grants offices too. Most of the non-NNSA, the weapons side of the house, my office supports to some extent. So I'd be remiss if I didn't kind of start with the same slide that I have for the IP slides. That I'm just a reminder, I'm an attorney, I'm not your attorney. Obviously look at the policy directive with your own counsel, and these are really my own personal opinions on the matter. And I'm really interested to hear your opinions afterwards. I see there's already a question in the chat, which is great. I'm looking forward to where this is going to go. So I think everybody knows it, but just to kind of set the stage a little bit, what the phases are. Phase 1 and 2. I think it sounds like everybody's on the Phase 2 side. I know there's multiple 2s, and then the Phase 3. I think the big thing to note on this slide is really the second element for each one. Phase 1 and 2 are funded by SBIR, STTR program funds. Phase 3s, by definition, are not. They come out of a different pool of funding. So what is a Phase 3? And by statute, I think what many of you have seen and heard this language is work that derives from, extends, or completes efforts made under prior funding agreements under the SBIR program. So it further includes in which commercial applications of SBIR funded research right, are funded from non-federal sources, or if there's products and services intended for use by the federal government. And then there's kind of this second prong here, which is kind of more focused on R&D. If there's further R&D, but it has to be competitively selected using a peer review and merit-based selection procedures. And this is straight from not from the policy directive, but the Small Business Act. And SCTR, the Small Business Act, kind of breaks up the SBIR, SCTR. The policy directives used to be separate, and the SBA recently smushed them together because you can see very, very similar. So one of the first questions I had when looking at this is, what do these terms mean? And these were really the two germane definitions I was able to find. Commercial applications, which frankly, this is an opportunity for improvement if you ever get involved with drafting any of these. Right there, the commercial application talks about basically what it doesn't include. And it's kind of this double negative, shall not be construed to exclude. But it certainly is intended to say it includes testing and evaluation products. It doesn't really give any definition beyond that, but it is a helpful clarification. And then the term research and research development, honestly, I left it in here because it was defined by the Act. It's a fairly reasonable definition in my opinion. So what isn't a phase 3 award? Obviously, anything that does not derive from a previous SBIR effort, right? And so just because your company gets an SBIR award, it doesn't give you a free pass to throw phase 3 on the table for any future funding. It has to extend or complete that effort. As I mentioned earlier, if it's funded by the SBIR SCTR program, it's not a phase 3, it's still a phase 1 or 2. It's kind of more of a fun fact at that point, but it is not a phase 3. And then unfunded work. The statute's pretty clear that it keeps talking about non-federal, non-SBIR funding. So I think Mandy's going to spend a little bit of time on this. I think the SBA they would love to say that there's kind of a right that small businesses have to be able to compete for these, to take government funding to continue the effort without any competition. But obviously there is other statutes in play, so the statutory language is limited to the greatest extent practicable. The federal agencies shall consider an award. I think that's definitely the goal, and the SBA would like to take this in my conversation with them as far as we can, but there are certain competition requirements that we have to go through for things like sole source awards. So what is the intellectual property that I'm talking about for these awards? I'm not going to go through the whole slide deck today, but the key provision here that I look at as a patent attorney, oddly worded, frankly, but it says retention by small business concerns with the right to data generated by the concern in the performance of an SBIR award for a period not less than 4 years. And there's a corresponding SCTR section as well. Like I said, I would not have phrased it this way, retention by 4 years. I would say the small businesses, typically, at least for DOE, can always retain copyright ownership of the generated data. But this is really more, I would say, called data protection, which the policy directive clarifies. I'll get into it more later, but right now we're in the 20-year data protection regime. If you have some older awards, it was 4-year extendable, which was administratively burdensome, I think, by everyone's opinion. And then, the key here in the policy directive is very clear in 8B2 that these phase 3 awards, even though they're not part of the SBIR SCTR programs, that these IP terms are identical to the SBIR SCTR data rights. So what are these rights? Just a quick summary for the data rights. That's a 20-year. You're still going to use the same legend. You're going to follow those same terms, which for DOE should be the same terms as that you see in the SBIR SCTR programs. And then there is that 4-year extendable. On the 4-year extendable, one important note: if you have one of those older awards and you have a phase 3, you need to make sure you go back to OSTE, because in those older awards, it was 4 years, but it got extendable based on the last deliverable of the last SBIR SCTR award. And so phase 3s count. And so that's going to extend that data protection, but we can't extend it if we don't know about it. So we spent a lot of work to make sure that the system is emailing you. Make sure you're getting those emails and when that final technical report's going to be released. and make sure you talk to Austie if you have any future SBIR Phase 3 awards to extend that. And this is what that legend should look like. I have a note here: no other legend should be used on the report when reporting to DOE. So patent rights, a little bit simpler. I thought I'd mention this. It's not technically a part of the Small Business Act. It's excluded in this policy directive. But if you're getting federal funds, BIDOL will apply. Should get the same typically patent rights that you would get in a normal SBIR STTR award. Just a reminder, for subcontracts, you cannot require that a subcontractor to give up these BIDOL rights as a condition to getting the award. You can certainly negotiate afterwards, but they are entitled to those same rights. And this again applies to federal funding. If it's privately funded, BIDOL doesn't apply. It's only if there's any federal funding involved. So receiving these awards, and this is the directly funded awards. When you run into any issues with it, I'd say talk with the contracting officer. We were talking a little bit before the call. In my experience, I think there's what I like to say opportunity for improvement in this, and I'm planning to kind of do a roadshow with some of the grants offices to make sure that they're more familiar with the Phase 3 as well as local patent council of these awards. I would say outside of all of this, NETL in particular has been issuing a lot more Phase 3 awards, and they recently came to me and said, well, we have a nice little drop down PDF for IP provisions that we use for all financial assistance. We did not include data, SBIR STTR data protection in there at first because of fear that it would kind of confuse with awards in the SBIR STTR program. But we're seeing more and more of these. So we're actually in the process now over the next month of updating that PDF to have a little drop down selection for Phase 3 projects to make directly funded DOE Phase 3 awards a little bit easier to process. Right now, it's kind of up to the local grants office to kind of copy and paste those terms in there. So labs is another area where I know there could be some challenges. And once again, I think a roadshow is probably appropriate on my behalf to meet with some of the labs. As I mentioned, being at this conference, I talked with some general counsels here to get their kind of general feel. And I'd like them to be a little bit more familiar with Phase 3s in general. I see this as mostly coming up with subcontracting. I think many of you, when you're working with their labs, you receive a laboratory subcontract for work. Those data rights may be of interest for you if it is a Phase 3 and extends the award. I'm not really including the tech transfer agreements as a part of this, mainly because if it's federally funded, we do have a streamlined SBIR, STTR, SPP for projects that are out of the SBIR program. Not for proprietary, so privately funded SPPs, actually the better deal is to do a proprietary SPP. Meaning you get that data forever, and there's that protection. The data is protected forever by the federal government when it's privately funded under a lab SPP. So you can negotiate up to that. So that's typically going to be the best approach than trying to work with the lab about a Phase 3 award. So that's all I have for now. We'll see if there's any questions.
I did tell everyone to put any questions in the chat, and I am not seeing any. But if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat. There must be questions out here.
Hi, Carol. I got a question. Jerry Hollister.
Okay.
So thanks for the presentation, Mike. So let's say a company has the potential to do a Phase 3 award, but the agency isn't familiar how to deal with that. Let's say it's a different agency. Let's say it's at NSF or USDA, for example. What is it something, since you're obviously familiar with it, would it be appropriate for the company to contact you and have you talk with that agency to kind of do a mini road tour and informational session with that contracting officer, or is that going to be too much of a stretch?
Yeah, I'm not going to make any promises, put it that way, but yeah, feel free to reach out to me, and I do have good relationships with NSF in particular, as well as NASA and DOD and others. So perhaps I can help explain some things, especially if it's one of our SBIR and CTR awards. That is something dependent situation. We could get the SBA involved as well, but we want to do what we can to help move these forwards. But on a lot of these issues, there's some agency discretion, like whether or not it is a phase 3 award. There could be a gray area depending on the situation, and obviously we'd have to defer to that other agency.
Sure. Okay. Thanks.
That's a good question, and I meant to highlight too. I mean, I can't make any promises, but working with our labs too. Feel free to contact me. We can try to work through that.
Thank you, Mike. So we do have a couple of questions in here in the chat, but I'm wondering if we ought to wait until after Manny speaks, because I think he might have, he might cover some of these in his discussion, because they are questions around what are the benefits of a phase 3, where do phase 3s come from in terms of conventional FOAs, and they don't really come out of conventional FOAs. And then the last one is just speaking to the differences between phase 2B, phase 2C, and phase 3. And I mean, the big difference
I'd
you
rather
already
Manny
hit.
answer
Yeah,
that
well,
one.
you already hit the big difference on that one. The phase 2B and the phase 2C would be funded with SBIR dollars, and the phase 3 is by statute, just what you described, non SBIR dollars. So that's the big difference between those. So Manny, are you ready to go? I think we're just a little bit early.
Yep. Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine. And there's going to be some overlap between what I'm talking about and what Mike is talking about. So I think that's certainly appropriate.
Okay.
So, and so I'm going to repeat some of the things that Mike has discussed. So again, I think as Carol mentioned, it's useful to hear this a couple times. So I'm just going to focus on in my talk, just focus on the policy directive and go through that. So here's a link. Sometimes you may hear us refer to the SBIR and STTR policy directive quite often. It's on the SBIR.gov website, but if you ever want to go read it, it is posted there, and I've just provided a link. And again, we'll get the slides and recording after the webinar, so be able to access that. So, and the policy directive goes through some of the same things Mike had talked about, but I'll just review it again because we do get questions about these things. So, as he mentioned, the phase 3 work basically has to derive from research and development done under the phase 1 or phase 2 of the program, and it's typically oriented toward commercialization, but as you mentioned, it can include a wide variety of things. It can include when you actually buy product or services and the research and development is done. So it's a whole spectrum. Phase 3 work also includes both private sector funded and federally funded. Sometimes we don't make that distinction. We basically consider any work you get after that as phase 3 funding. Now, with regard to the government's rights and, for example, the policy directive, everything I'm talking about, it's only going to apply, of course, to the federally funded awards. The SBIR policy directive doesn't apply to private companies giving you funding after your SBIR and STTR awards. So please keep that in mind. Mike talked about data rights. During your phase 1 and phase 2, most government research is published. And SBIR and STTR is unique in that we protect the final technical reports you submit instead of publishing them. And so and again, it's because of the nature of the award, we want the companies to commercialize their technologies. And so we don't want to disclose all the research that you've done to advance the technology to your competitors. And so that's why that protection is in place. And again, Mike talked about the competition requirements so that you can get sole source. So again, the policy directive spells this out. So I'm going to actually have an example or a question about this. I'll try to put a few of these in my presentation. And these are the kind of what I'm trying to show here are cases that have come up. Each of these are actual cases that have come up. And this is in many ways how some people will get a phase 3 award. You will actually just look at a DOE solicitation and you will say that, hey, this is something I'd like to apply for. And again, this is a non-SBIR and STTR solicitation. You apply for the award and the work that you're doing is actually an extension of a previous phase 1 or phase 2 SBIR and STTR award. And so even though there's nothing in the solicitation, DOE solicitation about phase 3 awards or data rights or any of that. The question is, are you still entitled to get SBIRT data rights? Is this a phase 3 award? And then, can the DOE office that issued the solicitation say that, well, we can give that to you, but you didn't disclose to us in your application that this work that you proposed was an extension of a prior SBIR and STTR awards. So can they deny that data rights to you because you failed to disclose that? So I will leave that out there for a moment to think about it. But in both the cases here, first case, yes, you are entitled to SBIR data rights because this is an extension of your previous phase 1 and phase 2 award. So even though there's nothing about it in the solicitation, you just apply it to a DOE solicitation. Where we're going to run into issues is that whoever issued that solicitation may not know anything about SBIR in phase 3. We have guidance on our website that's used by all of DOE. And if you run into a situation, and we've had this happen, a company gets an award, they say, I'd like phase 3 data rights, and the contracting officer in that office knows nothing about SBIR in phase 3, and they say, sorry, I'm not sure what that is, or if you want the award, you're just going to have to accept it without it. And that's the time you should probably come to our office or to Mike, and we will work with that contracting officer to educate them about the fact that, yes, in fact, you are entitled to these data rights. Because again, if you're going to continue this work with the objective of commercialization, not only do you want your technical reports submitted under your phase 1 and phase 2 protected, you want your technical reports submitted under this additional award protected and not published by DOE. So that's very important. And no, the contract officer cannot require that you actually state in your application that this work I'm proposing is an extension in order to give you those rights. You're entitled to those rights independent of whether you provided that disclosure. So, and again, this gets back to one of the questions asked: how do I get a phase 3? Most of the phase 3 opportunities, there generally will not be a solicitation that goes out and says this is a phase 3 solicitation. That's not going to happen. The two routes are generally going to be any of the DOE solicitations that are out there you can apply to, and if it's an extension of your award, that's a phase 3. The other choice, and you'll hear about some of that later in the talks coming up, is when you work with a program office, they like the work you're doing and they want to extend it beyond the phase 1 and phase 2 work, and then they will issue a phase 3. That will also not have a solicitation go out. They will actually work with you in many cases to give you a sole source award. So let's continue on with the policy directive. And again, this mentions, again, the phase 3 work may be for actual products as well as R&D or any combination. This next clause is also fairly important. There really, we have a lot of restrictions on phase 1 and phase 2 award. What's the maximum amount of the award? What's the maximum duration of a phase 1 or phase 2 award? And none of those restrictions apply to phase 3 awards. So you can get any number of phase 3 awards. You can get, based on a single phase 1 or 2 award from an agency, you can go get multiple phase 3 awards from different agencies. There's no cap, lifetime cap on a number of phase 3 awards you can get out of that phase 1 or phase 2 award. Size, this is another subtle point. Many of you are still small, but some of you may actually be very successful and pass the 500 employee threshold and no longer be considered a small business, or you may get acquired. But those phase 3 rights still apply. So we can still give you the phase 3 award, sole source award, and all that apply. You don't have to still be a small business. For phase 1 and phase 2, you do have to be a small business. For phase 3, that does not apply. And here, this is probably the most, in a way, the part that we run into most confusion on with regard to this requirement. Now, Mike mentioned this. It's in the statute. Here it is again in the policy directive. I'm highlighting a certain section here. And it says, I want to show you that it says agencies or their government-owned contractor-operated facilities. So those are 16 of the 17 DOE national labs fall into this category. Federally funded research and development centers, government prime contractors. Government prime contractor is anybody that has a funding agreement with the government. That means every SBIR and STTR awardee, this applies to you as well. You are a government prime contractor, okay? So when any of these folks wish to pursue R&D or production of technology developed under the SBIR program, they shall issue these phase 3 awards. And again, to the awardee that developed the technology, again, to the greatest extent practicable, And the key phrase I'm trying to highlight here is what they're saying is when they want to pursue the technology developed under the SBIR program. And I'll give some examples so that we can clarify that in just a second. Let me just finish out the policy directive. There are a number of other provisions in Section 7. A lot of these have to do with how agencies implement the requirements, give their sole source awards, and then you might actually want to protest. You may want to go in and say, hey, somebody did, some agency didn't follow the policy directive. And I feel like I deserved a phase 3 award and didn't get one. And so the policy directive spells everything out. How do you go to SBA and request an appeal? How do you request the agency to suspend work on the contract that it already issued? All of that's contained here, and SBA will again work with the agency to try to resolve those issues. And we've had that happen in the past. So, so let me go into a couple of issues to try to sort of explain this. And again, these are real cases. So for example, a small business sees a solicitation issued by DOE. It's not an SBIR solicitation, and it happened to be looking for new innovations in nuclear energy. This company previously received SBIR phase 1 and phase 2 awards to develop novel fuel rod technology for nuclear reactors. And they came to the Office of Nuclear Energy and said, hey, I think you owe me a phase 3 award. You're soliciting technology that was developed under the SBIR and STTR programs. So the question is DOE required to issue them a phase 3 award in this case? Let's think about it for a minute. Unfortunately, we don't have the poll tool up. I'd love to have that just to get people's impression, but so the answer is no. And again, the special application requirement applies only in cases where DOE is seeking the specific technology developed under the SBIR or STTR program. Okay, this is a broad solicitation. It's just saying, hey, we're looking for advances in nuclear energy. I am not seeking the technology you developed under the program. Of course, it's so broad that it would include that, but it probably is going to include dozens of other SBIR developed technologies. So it's not, the purpose of this special acquisition provision was not to prevent agencies from putting out broad solicitations. It was to make sure the cases where it was looking for your specific technology, they didn't have to compete it. They could just give you a sole source award. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's really the intent here, is to just make it easy for agencies to keep working with you on your technology, not to prevent the agencies from ever putting out a broad solicitation that would cover anything you've ever done. Here's a second example. So small business saw that a DOE at National Lab was issuing a competitive solicitation for something called an RF load. It's a way to dump energy, RF energy that's being generated. This was particularly, this DOE National Lab was working on this RF load for an ITER fusion reactor. The small business had previously received a phase 1 and 2 award to develop RF loads specifically for fusion applications. So I'll ask the same question here. And again, notice I'm saying it's not DOE, but the DOE National Lab. Again, as the policy director pointed out, the phase 3 preference applies not only to agencies, but their national labs, in the case of DOE, or even any of our awardees, including you. So is DOE required to issue the small business a sole source award in this case? And in this case, it might look very different from the other case, because now the agency is looking for a very specific technology. But the answer in this case as well is no again. I didn't put all the D out, but the competitive solicitation just said, I'm looking for an RF load that meets these performance requirements. It didn't actually specify what technology the company can develop to produce the RF load. Under this SBIR phase 1 and 2 award, a company pursued a certain route, a certain technology to be able to do that. In this particular case, that was not specified. So agencies can always put out requirements and say, hey, I need a piece of equipment that meets these requirements. I don't care basically how you produce it. So again, in this case, as same thing, special acquisition requirement did not apply. Now, in this particular case, the small business did appeal to the Small Business Administration. And we met with DOE, this particular national lab, to resolve this issue. But again, the issue came up here that the national lab was not seeking the technology developed under the SBIR program. It was seeking a broad set of requirements that needed to be met. And I think this is really where people are going to get the most confusion and the biggest gray area. and this sense that they were owed an award. And so I brought these two examples really to clarify that. And some of you may find it, it seems like it really narrows it down pretty tight. But that is really the effect of it. They're really looking, going back to the what is required, pursue the production of technology developed under the SBIR program. That's what that means. So I want to emphasize that. And again, I'm just coming back here and just saying, just emphasizing this point again, that this phrase implies, because I saw a question as well, when you're selling equipment to the DOE national labs, does this phase 3 preference apply? And so again, the answer is yes. If they're, and again, the lab has to be seeking your specific solution. The lab, if it says, hey, I just need a neutron detector that meets these requirements, they're free to put out those kind of, that kind of a competition. But if they want your technology, your specific technology, they have a right to do that sole source. And again, the challenge we often face, and you're going to face the same challenge, and you'll hear about that in some of the subsequent presentations, is that pretty much every organization has a philosophy that, they want the best value for their dollar. So they're always going to compete things. And that's, for example, the SBIR program. We're not like an investor. You can go pitch your program and we can meet with you individually and decide to give you an award. We always have to compete it. The government is always saying look at all the potential proposals before we decide we want to issue that. So no matter what organization, private companies, national labs, they all have competition requirements to make sure they get this best value. And then anytime you do a sole source, that's going to require some kind of justification and approval, no matter what the organization. In DOE, we have this thing called a JOFOC, which is called justification for other than fair and open competition. Anytime somebody is trying to do a sole source award, they're typically going to fill something out like this or some equivalent document. And again, your SBIR, the SBIR phase 3 preference is what you use when an agency would use when they're trying to do this. They would basically cite either the statute or policy directive as the reason that they're using this preference. I'm just going to conclude, if you actually want some good reading on some really detailed cases about this phase 3 preference, a couple of companies have, these actually happen to both be from the Air Force, but actually went to court. And as a result of going to court, they're very detailed stories of what happened in each of these cases where the company felt they were owed phase 3 preference. They're very complicated. I've summarized them here, but the summary really doesn't do justice to a lot of details in here. Some very good information about data rights. In this first case here in the Night Vision Corp, the company actually delivered a prototype to the Air Force, did not mark it as being covered by SBIR and STTR data rights. By doing that, they gave the Air Force the right to share that prototype with other people. So again, getting back to this data rights issue, it's very important. Now for DOE, you'll never send us a prototype. We're a granting program, not a contracting, but for contracting agencies, they're usually looking for a prototype from you as part of your work, and you will deliver that. You need to make sure the data rights not only go in your reports, but any prototypes you deliver as well. Anyway, I won't go into the detail of these cases, more here just for reference. Some of these court documents are 20, 30 pages long. But if you really are interested in phase 3 and all the details of that, it's very useful because they cite all the statute and applicable policy and all the back and forth that went back between the agency and the small business in these cases. So I thought I just pulled a couple of cases I thought were pretty enlightening. And, just the last note I wanted to make is, where do our awardees get phase 3 awards? Many of you have reported to the SBIR.gov, the company commercialization report. And I went in this a little while ago and pulled out some of that data. And what I'm showing here is when you report sales, where are your sales going? And just showing the breakdown here. You can see from the program inception, when we started getting reported awards in '83 through 2010, you can see the breakdown of where your sales are coming from: 3% to DoD and their prime contractors, and 10% to other federal agencies. These are for DOE phase 2 awardees. Okay, so I'm not doing this for all the federal government. I'm just looking at DOE awardees. Where are they getting their phase 3s? And you can see most of it's coming from the private sector. Again, a good amount from export markets, other third-party revenue. This may include licensing and other means of obtaining revenue from your innovations. I was just curious in looking at the difference in the last 10 years, 2011, 2020. You can see that the amount of essentially phase 3 awards or sales coming from the federal government has actually increased. The DoD side went from, for DOE awardees, 3% to 8%. From other federal agencies, this would include DOE, it's grown from 10% to 19%. So a fair amount of you are actually getting phase 3 awards or sales in this case. And again, sales would constitute phase 3 awards from the federal government. So I just want to point that out as well. And so I will stop there. That's all I had in my presentation. Just open it up for questions, and we can address some of the questions I think that came in under Mike.
Right. So there are some questions in here. One of them, I think I already addressed a little bit in that the real difference between any of the, say, phase 2A, phase 2B, phase 2C from a phase 3 award is where the funding is coming from. So there shouldn't be any confusion over that. Phase 2A, B, and C is SBIR and STTR funding, and phase 3 means it is not SBIR, STTR funding. It's some other funding line. It cannot be SBIR and STTR. And there is a question, if you get a phase 3, can you still apply for a phase 2 or a phase 2A, B, or C? And yes, we have people who get a phase 3 from phase 1. It's not very often, and it's often software, but they're two different pots of money. So there are some other questions in here, though.
Yeah. So yeah, just to confirm what Carol's saying. So so getting a phase 3 doesn't preclude you from continuing on your phase 2. I mean, you may have very different objectives. Again, if you're getting private sector funding, you may want to move in a different direction and move fairly quickly. And maybe the phase 2 award, maybe you don't want staff working on something that might take longer and is on a slower timeline. So yeah, you probably want to make sure that whatever you're doing is still aligned with where you want your business to go. But there's no eligibility restriction in terms of getting a phase 3 and then not being able to get a subsequent phase 2.
Yeah, just to clarify some of the challenges we have here. I mean, I think Manny did a great job talking about the JOFOC and granting a phase 3 award to a successful SBIR participant. Those are kind of easy, except we have to go through the justification for that. I think outside of that, the other kind of option B track for phase 3 is kind of almost a surprise to the agency, right? For our typical science FOA award, there's no data protection in those. And so we'll put out a FOA not intending to provide any data protection. And if it does extend the SBIR program, then upon selection, we find out, oh, this is a phase 3, and now we have to modify those data rights. And that's kind of, I think, was one of the questions, what's the big difference for the agencies, is that 20-year data protection can be a big change. For DOE, we do have what's called EPAC protected data that can 5 up to even 30-year data protection. So it may not be that big a deal, but it can be kind of a shock to agencies who are just putting out a standard FOA or a standard contract, and then we find out that it's a phase 3 after the fact.
Mike, there's a question in here from Izar at Nalu. I can just read it. I was in the process of typing it to you, but I can read it. It is, what if we get a subaward from a university under an NSF grant that continues a DOE SBIR funded technology? So I guess they're asking about what happens with their data rights.
I'd have to double check. I don't think there's really any restrictions on if it's a subaward or if it's from a different agency. So that would be a phase 3.
Yeah, again, I was trying to find that in the policy directive. And I think that's covered right here in the policy directive. If you look under section 5, I'm sorry, I'm gonna move some stuff around.
Yeah, I mean, this is the challenge we have with labs, because those are essentially subcontracts. And it doesn't have to be a DOE SBIR award that it extends. So that's something, but like I said, I mean, this is where it is a challenge for the agencies, because it's kind of a surprise, and the grants office may not even be familiar with the SBIR program and these rights.
Yeah, so I've highlighted the section of the policy director refers to that. It says subcontract to a federally funded prime contract may be a phase 3 award.
Right. And I think there's another question in here. It says, if we receive a contract from a national lab for products or services developed through the SBIR, is that considered a phase 3? So yes, that as long as it's not SBIR funds, that would be a phase 3. And then it says, but would there be a benefit to trying to make it phase 3? I think they're saying, is there a benefit to working with the lab to try to get them to continue the data rights?
Yeah, I
Right.
mean, there'd be two major benefits I can think of. I mean, one, if you're underneath that old 4-year extendable, it's going to extend your data protection by having it as a phase 3 award. And the second one, depending on the standard data rights, I think DoD varies a lot. For DOE, we have data dissemination statutes that tell us we need to make everything public as best we can. And so the typical lab subcontract would be unlimited rights data, meaning that there's no data protection there. And so the big benefit there, you move it to phase 3, you go from 0 years of data protection to 20 years. It's a pretty big change.
And the other thing to point out is, as a phase 3 award, depending on how the person at the labs is trying to get it through their procurement office, you know, if you designate it as a phase 3, that allows the procurement office to issue a sole source award and not compete it. And again, if you're not facing that hurdle, that may not be an issue. But if you are facing that hurdle and you have somebody at the lab wants to buy it, their procurement office said, fine, but I'm going to have to compete it. You know, this can avoid the need to compete it by designating it as a phase 3.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that could really help the agency or the lab too, because oftentimes you don't want to go through a full competition for this type of work.
There is a very long question in here. It came in at 1:27 if anyone wants to look at it while I read it. But it just says that they're working on a DOE phase 2. So they have an open phase 2 and they'll be completing it in February. And they think that there are government agencies that could leverage or use their technology. So what are the major action items that we need to be aware of for us to prepare a phase 2A or phase 2A? I guess that's a different question. And that would really be dependent on looking in the FOA and seeing if the topic is even eligible for phase 2A or B, right, Manny? What they would need to look.
And again, so we hold a phase 2 webinar for subsequent phase 2. So, you know, when you're getting close to the time and you're eligible to apply for that, you'll get an email indicating we're going to have a webinar just on phase 2. We'll go through the details of all that, you know, applying for phase 2A versus phase 2B and the differences, things like that. So you get information at that time. You know, you're mentioning as you prepare for phase 3. So the other thing we didn't talk about here today is that you are also eligible. Federal government as a whole can also issue you second phase 2s. So we have that program in DOE. We call it phase 2A or B. But you're also eligible based on your phase 2 to get a second phase 2 from another agency. And those other agencies might want to take advantage of that, and you won't have to go back and compete for a phase 1 in that agency. You'll just be able to directly get a second phase 2 from them. And I will tell you what that happens. You know, we usually get 1 or 2 a year from DoD, basically. And one of the challenges you have is we're only allowed to give you 1 second phase 2 award. So you can't get a second phase 2 award from DOE and also get a second phase 2 award from DoD or somebody else. So you are limited to 1 second phase 2 award. So that's the only thing to be careful about. And the agencies will, you know, DoD will contact us. We're interested in this technology. You know, can you confirm that you haven't awarded them a phase 2 or not planning to, because we'd like to give them a phase 2 award. So we get those kind of inquiries. So, you know, work with your counterparts early before you complete your phase 2. If you're, you know, other agencies might be interested in the technology, and they will explore the options. You know, the second phase 2 is great for them. They can just leverage their SBIR funds. If you're far enough along and you know, some of the other parts of the agency that procure technology would be interested in funding further R&D or buying it, you would engage with different groups, and then it will be a phase 3 award. So yeah, go ahead and start that early, you know, see if there's interest. And, you know, like I said, there's possibility of not only phase 3, but phase 2 awards from other agencies as well.
I'm just going to throw one more final question out here. I know there are more in here, but I want to keep us somewhat on track, and we have our next speakers up, but here's the last question. If one gets a phase 3, does the 20-year data protection plan start from the start date of the prior phase 1 or phase 2?
Yeah, I'm glad. Yes, I wanted to clarify this. So for these, the 20-year data protection, it's per award. So the phase 3 award, that would be from the date of the award, 20 years. And so if that prior phase 1, phase 2 efforts, those will be released 20 years from the date of those awards. And DOE does have a process for releasing those. Phase 3, is something to consider. We're really talking about deliverables to the government. If the government doesn't have the data, the protection is probably not a big concern for you. And so I would just consider that it'd be 20 years from the date of that phase 3 award for whatever the deliverable is to the government. And is that something you may want to talk with the prime recipient with what exactly is going to be delivered to the government and what the markings are.
Great. So thank you so much, Mike. And I know you were really busy and came out of your other conference to make the presentation. So I really appreciate that. And thank you, Manny, for adding on to this. I think someone in here thanks you too, Manny, for giving the court case examples. So so I think that is helpful. But thank you both very much.
My pleasure.
All right. So now we are actually going to go on and start hearing from some of our successful awardees. So first up, we have from Nettle, we have and the Office of Electricity, we have Stuart Cedries, and we have Susan Rosbach. And so if you would like to, I know you have a plan of how you're going to talk about this, so I'm going to drop out and let you all speak to your plan, but we're very excited to hear from you about your technology and your company, and then how the whole phase 3 process worked.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
So I'm actually from the Office of Electricity, and the way we're going to do that, I'm going to ask Susan to first introduce her company, a couple minutes, and then I talk about the actual phase 3, what went through and whatever, and then perhaps Susan can close with her thoughts too. And that's how we're going to do it. So Susan, talk about your company.
Thank you, Stuart. Well, we got a phase 1 responding to a FOA, just like everybody else, and Stuart turned out to be our program manager. That was for rapid assessment of distribution line damage using AI on drones. So we also successfully got a phase 2 on the same topic. We weren't quite done with it when we asked for phase 2A. There were a lot of competing topics being considered that year. So we did not get a phase 2A, but we were able to stay in the energy space, and we kind of pivoted. So my company's Brains for Drones. We had already looked at storm response, which is what we call a gray sky use case for drones doing inspections of downed poles and wires. And we switched to a more blue sky approach, which was looking at utility vegetation management, which was becoming increasingly important as utilities were being held responsible for what was happening in their rights of way. And what happened was the wildfires. And Stuart recalled that we had worked on the storm response use case and said, would your technology translate into a wildfire mitigation solution? And we said, absolutely. And this was synergistic for us. I wouldn't recommend you doing a phase 3 that you're not ready for. This was something we had been studying for a year already. How do you do vegetation management with drones? And what do utilities expect from vegetation management software? So we were able to say yes to that opportunity, and then work with Stuart and Nettle to make that a reality. So I'll pass it on to you, Stuart.
Okay, Stuart Cedres once again from the Office of Electricity. I wore different hats at the time. when I was working with Susan, I was the program manager for an SBIR topic, and her project in particular also deals with artificial intelligence. It's not just drones flying. They actually developed the brain of the drone. The drone can be off the shelf. So that was very interesting to me and to my office. I am currently the portfolio manager for the SBIR, so I look across the board for my office. So I'm very familiar with some of the legalities, thanks to Manny, who has educated me plenty of time. I always have questions, he always have answers. But I wear other hats and I have other levels of expertise in the office. I've been around for almost 30 years. So I have developed other levels of expertise as a program manager. So what happened is the Secretary of Energy, she wanted to accelerate technology to mitigate wildfires. They were thinking about the national labs, which made sense. And they sent the undersecretary and the chief of staff from the undersecretary to talk to a couple offices. And I was brought in due to my expertise in the area. And they asked me to provide recommendations. And among the recommendations, I told them, listen, I have several labs technologies I can recommend. However, what about small business? And now about the small business brain for drones. And I explained what they could do, and they were interesting, but the concern was, do we have to go to a FOA? We don't have time for a FOA. And I said, no, phase 3, because I heard Manny talking in the past about phase 3. And I said, and so in this case, although my office, about 99.9% of the times we do everything competitively due to the mission essential aspects of this task, we decided that using a phase 3 as a sole source, non-competitive, was a feasible solution because we're interested in accelerating the technology that dealt with drones and AI. So I contacted NETL, who tends, they do the procurement work for us, for my office, and they've been doing it for years. So in my mind, it makes sense to contact them. Now, but there were our challenges. So not everything is rosy when you do with procurements. So I want to explain some of the pros that Manny already explained. So, the sole source aspect, because when you're dealing with sole source with an SBIR phase 3, the justification tends to be something to the effect of, it was a previously selected phase 1, phase 2. So that's clear, and it's a kind of a continuation, transferring the technology a little bit. But the challenge is that that was the first phase 3 that we ever did. It wasn't a common thing for the team at NETL at the time. So they were going to do a cooperative agreement, which turned out to be what we did. But I had to explain to them, which means that the program manager had to have some sort of understanding about phase 3, and I contacted Manny. So that's one of the things that I recommend a program manager that wants to do a phase 3. You have to have some knowledge, because you have to kind of assist, at least with that knowledge, give them where to look for to your procurement team. So I told them, here's the small business administration policy that talks about the sole source, is the justification. Then I had to explain about the data protection, but I'm not a procurement guy, so I had to provide the source so that thing can then communicate with the lawyers. And instead of the lawyer looking everywhere, they already know what to look for. And it kind of softened things a little bit, but that part of the process was slightly painful because we were learning together as we were going to do that. And then clearly it's the interface with the small business, because I cannot be doing the interface when it's a contract. It has to do with the COR. So all those kind of things is part of the interaction. Another thing that I highly recommend is that you cannot just come and say, let's do a phase 3. You cannot abuse that. You have to truly do it based on a need or situation. And in this case, it was a sole source phase 3. It didn't come as a byproduct of a FOA. This was truly, no kidding, phase 3. So you had to at least the head of your organization, in our case, assistant secretary, they have to know that this is happening. It was easier for us because, it's to support something coming from the Secretary of Energy, but that's not always the case. So you need to let them know because it's a potential for waivers. And some waivers can only be signed by a person. In this case, unknown to me, because it has nothing to do with phase 3, but it has to do with contractual stuff. It was something related to cost-sharing. I didn't know that small business has to do cost-sharing because I knew for phase 1 and phase 2, that's not required. But for phase 3, I was notified that due to the Energy Act of 2005, depending of the type of project, if it was new research, you can waive the cost completely, but because this was, the purpose of this was to deploy, because we want to accelerate the technology to deploy, they had to pay a cost share. So that's a challenge. And we couldn't waive it completely, but we could reduce it, and that required the signature of the head of the organization. And the other ways of dealing with that, if they're partnering with a utility, the utility can pay for it, or it could be in kind. But on itself, it requires some paperwork, and time is money, the way I see it. Another thing, I think, the project itself was a high success. From that perspective, I saw a lot of value for the phase 3, high visibility. I got contacted by the public commissioner in Oregon. Utilities talk about it. And I knew that's why we picked them to do the phase 3. It cannot be something that you say, hey, let's do a phase 3, and maybe they cannot deliver. For us, because this is a contract, a cooperative agreement, it wasn't about reporting. I didn't care about reports. We tried to accelerate the technology. That was what the secretary wanted. For me, it was about what and when. What do I want? I want a brain for drone to partner with a couple of utilities and to do a demonstration of the technology to see how they can mitigate against the wildfires. And I wanted to do them by a certain time. Now, here's something that, good news, although we went through a lot of pain and they started a little bit later because we had to go to the cooperative agreement, they still finished before the labs projects that we had working around that time. They finished actually, the other ones finished too, but they finished before they did. So they follow everything. And it was a total success from that aspects. It's a lot, in my opinion, to gain from phase 3, especially when you're trying to do something that's mission essential. And money is another advantage. You don't have constraint about how much you can give on funds. Could be low, could be high. Time is not a concern. You can do 6 months like we did, or you can do whatever. And the money, like somebody asked the question, the money for us came from one of our programs. We could not use SBIR funds that we sent to the Office of Science, who manage the SBIR funding. When it comes to SBIR 1 and 2, it came from one of programs. So it has to come from the office itself, the funding. I think that's pretty much what I have. Susan, would you like to add something?
I think you did a great job explaining what it was like on your end to get this all going, because we were totally new to SBIR phase 3s also. We were on a mission, which I think sets small businesses apart from labs. We pushed through, we accomplished in 3 months what we would normally do in 6. And we were able to do a demo to our utility partners during a red flag warning. I mean, literally, Oregon was about to have a public safety power shutoff. when we were presenting our technology. So it's kind of a just-in-time opportunity. I'd say some of the awkwardness of working with Nettle was they kept forgetting that we had SBIR data rights. And whenever that happened, Stuart was our ally, and he was able to explain to them what that involved and what kind of things we were supposed to be sharing or not and why. And I think that really helped the whole process move smoother. So I definitely think you should be on very, very good terms with your program manager if you do a phase 3, because that person will be your advocate. And as far as the benefits, we landed 2 fantastic utility partners. We are now talking to dozens of utilities in the Pacific Northwest. My company is in Texas. Doesn't make a difference. We're over there, we're meeting them, we're finding out what their care-abouts are. And I think that was a special opportunity that would not have happened without an SBIR phase 3. So those relationships, the testimonials, the referrals, the articles that came out of it, the fact that we were able to present at conferences and things with them really helped accelerate the wildfire mitigation planning that needed to happen almost instantaneously. So that's our feeling on that.
Susan, if I may ask, do you have in your website, do you have kind of a video, if I'm not mistaken, about the demonstration of your technology that happened during?
Oh yeah, we have tons of videos now because our technology is always evolving. The demo day video, it's there somewhere. But yeah, that's there too. But there's plenty of videos of drones autonomously inspecting transmission and distribution lines. We ended up doing both. And we're very excited to share that with everyone.
Great. Thank you, you guys. I have one question specifically for you all that's in here. It says, I don't understand, were the cost share requirements waived as part of this phase 3?
I'm not a lawyer, and Manny and other lawyers, you might be able to chime in, but in our case, what I was told is if it was a new technology, basic research, it could be waived. But this was not basic research. I could not justify something when I sent a memo to the Secretary of Energy saying that we have a great technology that we can accelerate to demonstrate as a basic research. So, because this was going to be a demonstration type technology that has already been developed in phase 1 and phase 2, we couldn't waive completely the entire cost sharing. But there are ways of mitigating that by having a waiver about the amount as it relates to percentage. Instead of X%, you can go lower than that. And if the small business is partnering with a utility or two, which was the case here, the utility can pay that, or they can pay in the form of in-kind contribution. But for that, clearly, the small business that signed the contract has to provide documentation. So it depends on the situation. Once again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just saying what we experienced when it came to that.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah,
just go, Manny.
Yeah, just some background. So just so everyone's aware, in DOE, basic research is exempt from cost share. And then applied research and development outside of the SBIR program is typically a 20% cost share. And then when you get into the demonstration phase, it's a 50% cost share. So having the SBIR programs, which are exempt from those requirements, and so therefore both phase 1 and phase 2, you do not see cost share requirements. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware that DOE as a whole normally operates with cost share. There are other agencies that don't operate like that. And again, it will depend on the mission of the agency and things like that. But that is, every agency, you have to understand what their authorizing legislation requires. And for DOE, that's the case. Now, for all the cost share requirements, there is a provision for the secretary to waive cost share requirements. And in many cases, it's done even on a solicitation basis, as well as individual award basis. But again, as Stuart mentioned, that's not a trivial thing. That all has to be justified as to why that needs to be done. But those cost share requirements do apply to small businesses, as well as large businesses. I think there may be some exemption for the research institutions, again, typically who are doing basic research. I just want to provide that background. That is kind of the standard mode of operating for the rest of DOE. For those of you who sort of came into DOE through the SBIR door, you might think the rest of the DOE operates like that, but it does not. And so it does require waivers to mitigate that.
And Manny, phase 3 is not like the phase 1 and phase 2 under the law, right?
So, actually, we were just having a little chat at the beginning here. And so the way the Energy Policy Act is stated, it says the SBIR and STTR programs are exempt from the cost share requirement. And again, we're going to plan to have some legal discussion on what that means. There's always this question like phase 1 and phase 2 are how we normally think of SBIR and STTR, but as you saw from the information that I presented earlier, as well as Mike, is that phase 3 awards are also SBIR and STTR awards. So we'll have to get some legal opinion on what that means. But historically, and the other context I wanted to provide here is I think many of you would say, well, why isn't every DOE office or contracting office, program office, all fully educated on SBIR and STTR phase 3s and all the requirements? And again, they are relatively rare historically. And I will just let you know that DOE as an agency has not issued many phase 3 awards over the years. And you'll see other agencies like NSF, which say we're a basic science agency. We have never and do not ever plan to issue any phase 3 awards. So DOE, like other agencies, is we're really funding a lot of the early stage research, but we're looking to hand that off to the private sector and looking for follow-on funding to come from them. But we can, and like I said, when there is a critical need, and as Stuart mentioned, a very mission-aligned need, where in a lot of the research we do, maybe investors aren't going to step in right away. It takes time to get them on board or things like that. And we see an opportunity to address something in our mission. We can step in and make those awards, but they are still a small fraction of our awards. I will contrast that with DoD, which will tell you they give out more phase 3 dollars than they do in phase 1 and phase 2. So they're the complete opposite of most other agencies. Their focus is on getting technology to the warfighter. They do SBIR and STTR so they can procure those products. We are generally doing SBIR and STTR to benefit the public and hope our small businesses go get private sector funding in order to do that. And so the phase 3s are, again, relatively rare for us. So let me stop there. Probably talked too much.
No, you were fine.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to thank both of you, Stuart and Susan. Thank you very much for joining us. And I wanted to mention, I know, Susan, you had it in your signature line there, your website address, so brainsfordrones.com. And then also she does have a success story on our success story page. I'll put the link in there while the next people are getting set up. But again, thank you very much for sharing your story. All right, next up, we're going to hear from Argonne National Lab. So we have two folks from Argonne. We have Jeff and William from Argonne National Labs. One of them is a program manager, and then William is from the contracting office. And we are going to hear from Marcus from Radiobeam. So I think I checked, all three of you are on the Zoom meeting, and so we'll get you highlighted and let you begin your discussion. I think we're just going to have you introduce yourselves, and then Marcus, if you want to tell a little bit about your company and the technology and how things got going with the phase 3, then we will also have William and Jeff jump in to add their pieces and their lessons learned.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm from Radiobeam. I represent kind of the Radiobeam family of companies, but so what particular project this was surrounding was a thermionic RF source for Argonne National Lab for the APS. This was a bit of an interesting one because it was direct to phase 2. So there was no phase 1. It went straight to phase 2. There's been phase 2Bs, phase 2As, and even a phase 2C for this project. But actually before the phase 2C, Jeff over at Argonne asked, hey, we need these guns. We need these RF sources. In fact, we need a couple of them. So can you get them to us? Here's the date, here's when we need them. So this is, from Radiabeam's perspective, exactly what the SBIR program should be, and matches a little bit closer to what DoD does. As Manny was just saying, DoD says, we want this thing for the people we fund, for the warfighters in that case. We want to buy it. Here's some money to help you develop it. So this is actually kind of what happened with this project. There was a call put out to develop an RF source that the APS upgrade needed. Jeff, I'm going to put words in your mouth, so feel free to cut me off if I'm incorrect. But that's basically the way Radiabeam looks at it. So we put everything we could to developing the perfect gun for the APS upgrade. Several prototypes, and worked very close with Jeff and his team to get it working. But then the time came to procure them. So this is after some prototypes, testing, it's been shown to work. From Radiabeam's perspective, this is the perfect phase 3. It should just be a sole source. The specs are written, it should go in. It did end up being a competitive procurement. So it went out for a standard bid. It went through the standard bid process and the time and effort that's required for that, which is unfortunate, but I think William working through it was great. And Mike was saying earlier, I think it was a surprise to the procurement officers in the lab sometimes, like, what the heck is this phase 3? Why is this company saying we get data rights? What were they talking about? But I think William is just a testament to the patience that's needed for people like us, for the small businesses that say, hey, we really want our data rights, and being accepted, going through that process to formally make it a phase 3. But from the technical side, Jeff, I think they're working for you now. I think you've had them for a while. I know this isn't a technical type thing, but oh, Jeff, you're muted.
You're muted, Jeff. You should be able to, I might be able to unmute you. No, I can't. But we do have IT help on here that should be able to unmute us. You.
Fortunately, Jeff, you are unmuted. It's very well
It's-
maybe on your side. Check your mic.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's happened to me before. There's some setting, like check your settings and your sound, and sometimes something in there usually gets messed up. I know it happens for me on Zoom.
While he's looking for that, William, maybe you can talk about, since you were new to phase 3 and this was you were like, hey, what's phase 3?
Absolutely.
Maybe you can speak to that while he is working on becoming unmuted.
Yeah, I don't know how much I can really add. I know this was the first time I've seen anything like this. And of course, I wasn't at Argonne that long, and then this came across my desk. And so first question was, what do I do? And then I went to my supervisor at the time, and that's not something that I think she's ever seen. And so since we kind of had to continually go up the ladder and figure out on how to do this. So eventually we figured it out. And, I do apologize. I would if I could pull up our procurement system, but the servers are down for whatever reason, so I can't get into there. I don't remember the whole bid thing, but I'll take Marco's word for it on that. There probably was. So basically, I'll be honest with you, I had my handheld, with my upper leadership who've had this experience before, and even our legal department, they kind of guided me through every step of the way. and gave me some contacts. I could give to Mike. Was one of the emails that I have actually pulled up now, going through all this stuff. But I mean, I think once we got I got all my documents, my information's figured out. I think it was, relatively smooth from there. I mean, I know Marcos took 2 weeks off during that time, so we waited a bit there. But no, I think, again, once everything, we have our ducks in a row, and I think after that it went smoothly, and the process took a little bit because again, this was something very, very new to me, that I had no clue what it was. But like I said, eventually our legal department kind of got me through it.
Great. So next time you'll be ready. If it comes across your desk, you'll know exactly.
Yes.
Yeah,
So-
and what our experience at Radiobeam has been, since we sell things to a lot of the labs and different SBIR products, is we are doing that education quite a bit. Because I think there isn't really a formula written down or a path written down for the labs to follow. So, William and I figured it out together, I think, at Argonne, but, we're working on other things at other labs, and, we have to start that process again, and all the time that it takes to do that. So, something from the DOE coming down to the labs would be helpful for, I think, all of the SBAAs.
I do agree with
yeah.
that. Yeah. There maybe should be, I think, more training on it. And again, even if it's not something that is quite frequently, but they do happen.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be better. And Marcos was, really, really good at working with me, and even done that and guided me through it. So in the end, it worked out.
You guys hear me?
Oh, yes, we can
Oh,
hear
that's
you.
nice. Okay, I had like 3
Okay.
backups here, getting ready to jump to the next setup and the next hookup with these microphones. Okay, so I'm Jeff Walschmidt, right? So I also work at Argonne with William. And I have to say, Marcos was great to work with. We had, and William also, so the process was new. And for me, being on the technical side, it was something that I don't really have to experience much. And so as much hands-off as possible is always makes it easier. But as far as the process went with phase 3, for us, it was, kind of life-saving for our facility. I think the reason why I jumped from a phase 2 right into a phase 2, and then pretty quickly went to a phase 3 when phase 3s are pretty rare, was because of the urgent need that we had for this. And so from a technical point of view, the opportunity and the availability of phase 3 was very well received here and very, very useful for us. And then the point that was made previously, I think it was Susan, I think that's her name, who had mentioned it, that developing a good relationship with the people that on the other end, on Radiobeam's end, throughout the process is absolutely invaluable. And this program, the thing I liked most about the program, right, was the ability to be able to have regular discussions and to have real input into a new design. So the ability to be able to have discussions, to be able to first have Radiobeam build a prototype for us, okay, after quite a bit of effort, quite a bit of back and forth, okay, where any kind of issue that came up, we're able to discuss from a technical point of view. And then to have that tested, and then to go into the phase 3, where we're able to get the actual production line hardware that we can then insert into our system to ensure that we get the beam quality that we need, that we get an operational system that we were without, and the need for the phase 3 to begin with. We actually now have a system that's reliable and robust. So the whole process of that was, I thought, very well orchestrated, very well managed. And it was a tremendous opportunity to work with a company where there was such back and forth and such openness to get something that not only works, but to works, well, and will work reliably, and we feel will exceed specifications such that its reliability will be enhanced.
Right. So what I think I'm hearing here is something that is very similar to what Stuart and Susan said, and then what we're probably going to hear from DoD at the end when we hear them speak to Phase 3 awards is the urgency. You know, the urgency to have a solution. There's a need out there, and there's people within the SBIR community that can fill that need. So in this case, it was sounded very similar to what you would see with DoD, where there is a need. And, you know, Jeff, if you're the war fighter out there in the trenches of science, you needed that as quickly as possible to keep going. So so I think that's something we can take away. And then also, Marcos, what you brought up, and it was also brought up by Mike in the very first presentation, you know, that he being with the national labs this week and having some opportunity to speak with them really started to understand how Phase 3, there's not a lot of information that gets distilled and given to them about Phase 3.
Yes, I think, you know, Phase 3 is an unfortunate use of terminology because you say Phase 3 and, you know, I think procurement offices and contracting officers say, well, we don't do SBIRs. It should be
Right.
something like SBI. Even internally, we have this discussion. We try to think of it as SBIR derived products are what we're trying to sell to the labs.
Right.
They're SBIR derived, and then Phase 3 is a legal mumbo jumbo that's
Contracting
on a
vehicle or almost.
yeah, it's something you write on a piece of paper because that's the formal name. But and I think that's a recommendation I could give to the other small businesses. Don't say SBIR Phase 3 to procurement officers or your technical customers. Say SBIR derived product is eligible for sole source, and that's really going to get you a lot further. Yeah.
As Manny, I just wanted to chime in with you know, the comment about training for the labs. This is something we have discussed again with Mike and actually some of the labs in the past, including Argonne, and that's something we will be looking at going forward. I think that's sort of under discussion. I just let you know, some people often think, just for the general audience here, that the DOE labs and the DOE are the same entities, and I just wanted, for those who are not aware, so DOE labs are contractors to DOE, just like actually SBIR companies are contractors to us. So they're not part of us. We can't go in there and write procurement policies for them and things like that. So we do kind of work at an arm's distance in terms of trying to provide guidance for that. And there are some rules about how we do that. But we are trying to work and educate them. We have issued some letters to the labs in the past, making sure they're aware of Phase 3, but I think we've had discussions that we need to go to some of the procurement conferences that the labs hold to work on educating them more about their ability to issue these sole source awards. So thanks for that comment.
Great, and thank you for clarifying. I knew that you had instructed me on that in the past, that we can't tell them what to do. So at any rate, we are aware of needing to provide more clarification on it. I'll say it that way. Any last words of advice? No. All right. Well, thank you all very much. And I am very glad that you three could come. It was nice to have someone from contracting here as well. And Marcos, I did put your success story in there as well. So just to let everyone know, Radio Beam has a success story that was written around this project as well.
Thank you.
All right, so we have our next group coming up. Our next group is going to talk about efforts of putting Phase 3 in place with NNSA. Hi, Katie, I see you are there. And I saw Rick, there's Rick. Oh, great, great. Arden is here. And I think that Bernok is here. I think, yes, perfect. All right. Okay, great. All right, so I will let you all take it away. The general gist of it is just to introduce yourselves, introduce your two companies, and speak to the technologies that you have and how you worked. In this case, I think you both worked with Arden on it. And I think also, Katie, did you work with both of them as well? So this is great. And Katie, thank you for coming off of your vacation to join this. I very much appreciate it. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so I'll let Rick, I see you are already off mute, so maybe you want to go first?
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm Rick Russo. I'm a retired scientist from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and I started Applied Spectra as spin-off technology. And we had a DOE NNSA NA22, I think it is, office to SBIR phase 1 all the way to phase 2C to develop laboratory instruments for doing elemental and isotopic analysis. And these it really complemented what DOE was using in terms of these thermal ionization sources, secondary ionization mass spectrometers. And what we had developed was a rapid way of doing elemental and isotopic analysis. Again, large laboratory systems. We had very good success in terms of the performance on being able to measure nuclear related materials much faster than these traditional technologies. We started placing instruments in the national labs as well as some of the DOE stakeholders and even commercialization. So we've since made about 430 systems that we've sold worldwide. So Arden contacted us and asked whether or not the same technology could be developed into a field instrument. And because again, it doesn't require a mass spectrometer, so it can be something that can be used in the field. And again, based on the results that we got for the laboratory instruments, we could see how we can make this happen. And it really involved doing some more R&D in terms of driving the sensitivity down so it addressed the specific requirements that Arden had. So it was a great opportunity to really, for what I see going from the phase 2 to the phase 3 was to address general DOE, what I considered NNSA mission requirements to a very, very specific application that Arden had talked to us about. And it also opened up the opportunity for us to consider taking these large laboratory instruments to the field. And that's what we've been able to do under the phase 3. And, you know, in addition to what Arden has asked us to address the particular analysis, we now have a lot of interest from the general forensics community for the use of this type of a field instrument. So it's been an amazing story. So that's what I have to say.
Great. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your experience, Farna? Oh, and you might be muted still. There.
Okay, yes, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Similar situations, we had a phase 1 and 2 SBIR from NA22. And at the time it was it wasn't towards any specific goal. It was just pushing the technology to the level that really doesn't exist. And I'm talking about battery-free sensor communications without batteries to the level of over 1 kilometer distance, which has not been anywhere. And that was generally for security applications, for persistent surveillance. So it didn't really target any specific customer or so. And that's phase 1 and phase 2 to kind of push the limit, see if we can have a proof of concept prototype. When phase 3 came and discussions with Arden, we targeted that towards IAEA's need for dry cask monitoring. I mean, the communication range of 1 kilometer was in proof of concept, but in terms of the IAEA needs for security, tag authenticity, any type of tamper indication, what if somebody removes this tag from a kilometer away and put another one to report it to a long distance. All those capabilities were developed under phase 3 in a way that from a proof of concept prototype in phase 2, not only, the technology was already beyond what is available, but that was proof of concept. So from proof of concept, we went to commercialization and targeted towards IAEA. We still are in touch with them, and at some point it eventually will go to them. But phase 3 allows us to make the technology more versatile. Although we met the high bar for IAEA, now we can address many other applications. Specifically, the recent one that we're talking to some customers is about smart farming. So reading sensors from a kilometer away without the need for any batteries. One of the applications that we are recently talking about is smart farming with even a simple moisture sensor that can stay there forever when there is no battery to change. Therefore, not only the batteries do not pollute the environment and we report to a distance, we can have adaptable irrigation. So only sense the areas that needs more water and provide water to there, and not any other area. This idea has been there for a long time, and people are talking about wireless sensors to do adaptable farming or adaptable irrigation. But for a kilometer range, everybody needs batteries. And that goes against the whole idea of ecological susceptibility or ecological sustainability. And in that sense, if they're they try to conserve water, but then they have to remove the batteries and put it somewhere that pollutes the environment again. So with our advancement coming from this phase 3 for IAEA, now we are going to serve the farming systems, conserve water, and also be good to the environment also. That's the opportunity, and thank you, Arden, for that opportunity. It was a great path from research to commercialization. And Katie also worked very hard with us to address the needs of IAEA and also the changes that they wanted in the middle to our contract, basically.
Great. So thank you both. So Arden and Katie, do you all want to speak to how, I know Katie, you are very successful in getting phase 3 awards through. You are like our gold star person here today. And so we just like to have you speak, Arden, about how you work with contracting, how you work with the small businesses, any special tips you have for folks. And then Katie, if you have any suggestions, maybe when you first did your first one, some of the things you had to think through. So Arden, I'll let you go.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the two companies here are just pretty incredible in my book. In these cases, we were given specific challenges from the International Atomic Energy Agency that I didn't even think were possible to accomplish. And I figured that they were breaking the laws of physics and engineering. And when I talked to both of them, is there anything here? Because I knew they had phase 2s. Is there anything here you could even do? And they rose to that challenge and actually did it. It's amazing. In our office, we're charged we must transfer 5 technologies, tools, or methods to the International Atomic Energy Agency every year for their safeguards verification mission. So we do fund high TRL research and development for these specific needs, and mostly it goes to national labs. I cannot fund phase 1 and 2 SBIR, so I do troll for those to see if there's anything that's nearer term commercial, because then it's just such an easy product for the IAEA to have, because it's something that they can actually use quicker. And the problem is that the market for safeguards instruments is really small. And so commercialization is really difficult. So, in phase 1, you can try out new ideas, see if it works. Phase 2, though, you need that marketing plan. And if you need it for safeguards, you better find somebody else. So it's hard for us to do phase 2s for safeguards. But for phase 3, it's a fit for purpose technology, and it can solve a real problem. We have a prototype, a demonstration, maybe a field test. And at the end, you get a commercially viable product, or nearly so. It's at least well on the way. The biggest hurdle I think we have is that it's kind of a three-party agreement, but you can't do those, right? At least Katie reminds me of that a lot. And so, you know, we have to run the requirements past the IAEA, but they can't ask us to do specific things, and we can't ask people. So we try to figure that out. And sometime, in one case, they actually watched field tests from Vienna remotely in California and provided feedback to me. And of course, they changed their mind, which might mean I have to change mine. And then all the management changed. That was, I think, the biggest hurdle. You know, my customer loved it, and then they changed managers, and then we have to convince them again all over again. So it's kind of a, you know, real world problems. And so, but you know, it is R&D. Some things will work, some things don't work. Learning happens, I think, especially when things don't work, and then you find another solution. And I think both of these projects learned that very well. We're so happy with our SBIR phase 3 contracts, and we expect the products from both of the companies to be successful in the future and change the world, whatever they do. It's great.
Okay, my name is Katie Robleski. I'm a contracting officer. I used to be an NNSA for about 15 years, but I just recently switched over to DOE, and I'm supporting the loan program office. So I don't think I'll be doing any SBIRs over here, but that's okay. So when I first got my first SBIR package, first of all, I have to say none of this would really happen without Arden, because as a CO, I do not go out there and look for these vendors that have phase 2s to make a phase 3 award. I mean, I'm given a requirement. And I think, you know, a lot of SBIR vendors, I think that's one of the problems, is that they need to find programs that are willing to move their, you know, their product to the commercialization phase, to phase 3. So Arden, first of all, she is very good about going and doing that and seeing what's going to work best for NNSA. With that being said, years ago, I got my first SBIR package for phase 3, and I think, as William said, I was kind of like, what is this? I have no idea. And, you know, you start researching, and phase 3s are not even in the same world as the phase 1 and 2s when it comes to contracting. You know, just a few things that I wanted to point out about the phase 3s. They are exempt from any notice publication requirements. So that's a big thing. For competition, they are basically exempt from competition in phase 3 because the competitions for the phase 1 and phase 2 awards satisfy any competition requirement, which is also a very good thing. One of the biggest things that shocked me was that there is no limit on the number, duration, type, or dollar value of phase 3 awards. I mean, as long as the phase 3 award is derived from a phase 1 or phase 2 award that's been completed, I mean, there's basically no restrictions. And in the federal contracting world, that was very hard for me to understand. I did a million, you know, justifications for other than full and open competition. And when it comes down to it, you know, you have these regulations and these acts that say, you know, when you're in the SBIR program, you don't have to follow this stuff when it's a phase 3. So I kind of enjoyed getting the phase 3 awards because it's helping these small businesses, you know, move forward with the commercialization of their product. it's a way to introduce them to the government contracting world. So I find that maybe one of the hardest things is for the vendors to provide documentation for their pricing proposal, because they are newer companies. And when it comes to using government funds, like, you really have to show that the rates are reasonable, and there is a lot of information that is put into that. And we pull our pricing team into that. So they are a very big part of this. But it's just, it's nice to see these small businesses just move forward. And then, once I did the first one and I realized there's really no restrictions, they ended up being kind of the easiest ones. And the only problem is just the phase 2's getting their names out there for the programs to get them to, have a contract for a phase 3. That's about all I have.
Right. No, that's awesome. So I'm kind of keeping a list here of things that I'm hearing people say that seem to be common themes. So again, Arden, from what I heard you say, urgent need. There was an urgent need for these technologies that you could fulfill with them. But the other piece, because I think it went on from last time, actually all 3 of them so far, you need an internal champion. So, Arden, you were their internal champion. And, from the previous one, we had Jeff. And then we had Stuart, so you really need an internal champion. And then the other piece is what, Arden, I think you mentioned this, and now we know because Katie has left, but she has assured me that her replacement is good too. So that people change. So they change positions. And if you have worked hard to get someone to understand what phase 3 is all about, then they might leave. Or in your case, Arden, you said management changed. So then some of the specifications changed on what you were working on. And I think often, in terms of an internal champion, those change as well. Program managers change. And so then you have to try to educate all over again about the technologies. And I think in our roundtable discussion that some of them are going to speak to that, just when technology got their SBIR, 10 years ago, and the PM has left, and now the national lab finally needs it because they've caught up. Then, there isn't an internal champion. So anyway, I think those are the lessons that I took away from hearing you four speak. Are there other pieces that you think are important for people to hear? No, there is a question here. It's, what is the best way to let a contracting agent or officer, I would say, know that our technology is eligible for a phase 3 when bidding for a contract?
So, this kind of comes back down to the internal champion in the program, because as a CO, and as most COs these days, we have a lot of work going on. Not just this. So
right.
The last thing I'm doing as a CO is going and looking for more work that isn't requested from a program office. If that makes sense. Like I honestly think the best way is to reach out to the programs. And then the programs have that relationship with the contracting office. But I used to be a small business POC over in NNSA, and I got to say, a lot of small businesses send capability statements every day, and it's like, well, what am I going to do with this? Because my job is to do the contracts for the programs, so they need to reach out to the programs to say, hey, we provide this service. There's other things that go into that, but I do think really to get into the contracting side of things, you need to have that internal program champion.
Right. We do have a memo that we have on for awardees. It's on that site on our website. So I'll put the memo, the link to it in the chat here. And I don't know if that would help, James, with your question, but I think it would be a first step potentially, because it outlines the things that have been stated by Mike and by Manny here, and at least gives them an idea of where the information is coming from. It didn't just get made up, it actually exists. And so and some of the things that Katie made reference to, that it doesn't have to be sole source, or it can be sole source. You don't have to compete it because it's already been vetted, that there is no limit in the size or the number of them. And the other piece that often comes up is well, what if there was a gap? And it also doesn't matter if there was a gap, as long as you can show that it went back to SBIR. So
And
we do.
just to
Oh,
add
go
to
ahead.
that really quickly,
Yeah.
there really is no time limit between the time of phase 2 and a phase 3. I mean,
Right.
it could be years. And also there's no time limit between a phase 3 and a follow-on contract. So just to keep that in mind as well.
Right, right. Thank you. So we do have a question here. It's very long, so I haven't read it all, but I will say it out loud, and we'll see what we can do with it. It says, we have been in the fortunate position that during our initial phase 1, we received a PO from a commercial vendor. We are now currently in our phase 2 and have received a second commercial order, which was quite large. And additional commercial orders continue to trickle in, but are asking for modifications to our product outside. My question is, what is our best strategy moving forward? Well, these don't sound like, I mean, they are phase 3 awards because they are non-SBIR dollars, but they don't sound like they are government phase 3 awards. So what we're talking about here really are government programs and agencies using this type of contracting to utilize your technology.
Yeah, just to answer that question, it sounds like what they're asking about is actually more of a phase 2B award.
Okay.
So that's what the phase 2B is for, is once you've completed your phase 2 and you've identified other commercial opportunities but need more R&D, that's the purpose of the phase 2B. That's how I would move forward with that. But getting back to the broader question, I think people keep asking, like, I've done a phase 1, I've done a phase 2, who do I talk to get a phase 3? It seems to be the question that keeps coming in. And, there I would say the most important resource you're going to have initially, again, is your actual program manager for your phase 1 and phase 2 award. That's your connection in DOE. And they will be able to tell you, like, hey, is anybody else in DOE I need to be talking to, or anybody in the labs I need to be talking to? They're going to know those connections, right? So you should not be treating your DOE program manager as this kind of other, this is probably one of the most critical resources you have. If you haven't built a relationship with them, you're doing something wrong. So that's what I would just wanted to add to the conversation.
Right. No, that's a great point. Internal champion, that seems to be the very common thread here. So thank you for mentioning that again, Manny. So I did put the link to the memo in the chat. And again, that's just a really basic document, but it gives you all the key points, and that could be something you use as a first step in trying to talk to a CO about it. I know we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but I think that we do have our DoD folks here, so that we could just jump into that presentation. But first, I would really like to thank all of you for coming in and joining us. Any last words of advice? Maybe don't give up.
I have a lot of people that still reach out to me about SBIRs, and I am always telling everybody to go for it. They're really not that, they're not that bad when it comes to the contracting side. The COs tend to get scared. So I push for it. And even over in DOE this week, I've had a CO asking me how to award an SBIR phase 3. So, I hope that we can continue to increase the exposure to the program because I do think that it is a really great program. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I'll just say that for my company, the SBIR has been absolutely why we are where we are. So thanks to the entire SBIR process, including the phase 1, phase 2, and now Arden, giving us direct contacts to somebody like the IAEA is just phenomenal opportunity. So thank you.
Exactly the same for us too. Thank you, Rick. You just put it in a very, the way I wanted to say. Thank you so much. And thanks to Arden and Katie.
Great. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I know that Jerry is here. I actually don't know if Quentin has joined us yet, but Jerry, I think you are here. There you are, Jerry.
Yep, I'm here with you. Been enjoying the conversation.
Great,
So,
great. So I know you had a long list of things that you wanted to talk about. So we could either wait a few minutes and see if he joins us, or if you feel comfortable getting started, I'm okay with that as well.
yeah,
I have, if that's good. Otherwise, I have some filler I can talk about. But if you would like to go ahead and get started, that's fine too.
sure. So, yeah, I mean, I can just go ahead and give a little background about what happened and kind of what prompted you to reach out.
Yes.
Niwave is a company that is a spin out from the national labs, the big superconducting national labs, and the technology, one of the early technologies that was developed through the DOE SBIR program was a quarter wave superconducting electron gun. We were doing this in collaboration with Brookhaven National Lab, and in particular, Dr. Ilan Ben-Zvi, who at the time was at Brookhaven, was one of the internal champions that you've been talking about. And while we were developing this in phase 1 and phase 2, Ilan had suggested that there was this new program at the Navy that might have some application for this technology that was primarily geared initially at some work there at Brookhaven. And so, the DOE program, the SBIR, went through phase 1, phase 2. And so we got introduced to the people at the Navy. There was a number of groups that we got introduced to. And so one of which was Quentin Salter and his compatriot, Sarwat Chapel. And they were at ONR and still are, for that matter. And we also met with a number of people at the Naval Postgraduate School out in Monterey who were doing some work on this free electron laser program for the Navy. So what happened was over time, we got to know both the people at NPS out in Monterey, and then the people that were funding a lot of this work on the free electron laser at ONR. And so, make a long story short, we ended up getting several contracts through both Office of Naval Research, ONR, and also the Joint Technology Office for High Energy Lasers, which was as it says, it's a joint technology office that was working on the FEL program as well, the free electron laser program as well. So there was a need for this technology. This superconducting technology needed a high average current injector, and the technology that we had been developing through DOE SBIR met that. Had to be significantly adapted for the Navy use, and so we received a series of contracts from both ONR and JTO to develop the technology that would help facilitate what they called a technology injection or a technology insertion point in this program. Now, generally speaking, if you're working or you're trying to get into the DoD acquisition, in other words, a phase 3 at DoD, one of the there's a few challenges. Really, there's a lot of challenges. First is identifying the program and making sure that you know that your technology fits and it can be inserted into their program, because they already have a solution most likely. And so if you're trying to provide a new technology, you're going to have to get their attention. And that's where, you know, once we started meeting with Quentin, his team, and the team out at the Naval Postgraduate School, we were able to demonstrate that. But that's the first thing. Is the first challenge is really finding out who is interested at DoD. The second is who's going to fund it, because most of the R&D budgets, ONR happen to have what was called they call it an innovative naval prototype. It's not. It's somewhere between SBIR and a program of record. And so a program of record is one that's, you know, it's a line item in the budget, and it's what acquires technology. You know, easy example would be F-35 program. So that's a program of record. Well, the free electron laser program was still prior to that. So it didn't have its own funding. It had one award, but it was not a program of record. So we had to figure out a way to fit into a budget. And so that's going to be your second challenge when you're trying to do any work at DoD, is figuring out who's going to pay for it. So once you identify a champion that's interested in your technology, then you got to figure out how you get into the budget. And the budgets are set, you know, a couple of years in advance. So you really have to figure out how you, well, first of all, how much it's going to cost, and then get into the budget, and then convince them that it's worth putting, you know, carving out something that was already in the budget and, you know, kind of redirecting it to your technology, to acquire your technology. So those are some of the general challenges that anytime anybody's going to be doing work at DoD, and those are not trivial challenges. It's not easy to always find the people. I mean, just even listening today, that's been one of the recurring questions. You know, how do we find somebody? Who do we even talk with? And I know it was said many times, and Manny just said it a few minutes ago, work with your program director there at DOE. And that's certainly one of the ways that we got directed. Specifically for our program, this particular development, you know, we had to convince the people at both the Naval Postgraduate School and ONR that this technology was really an insertion point. It really did solve the problem that they had. It solved it in a way that was going to be, it had advantages over the current solution that they were entertaining. And so in particular, in this case, a lot of the INP money, this innovative naval prototype money, was being funded, or it funded the labs, some of the big accelerator labs, to do development. And their developments, I mean, if anybody knows anything about the big superconducting accelerators at the national labs, I mean, they're very touchy. I mean, they're on all sorts of isolation so that, you know, if you bump into it or something, it can screw the whole thing up. Well, that's not very good for a shipboard use. So we had to do a lot of some of the innovations that we had come up with were much more robust than the existing technologies. And so that was kind of the hook for us, was showing that in this particular application, we had a much more robust solution than what the current kind of state of the art was. It would still need a lot of development. So there was additional SBIR that went into that, and then the what was called phase 3 from both the Navy and the JTO was what funded that.
So can I ask you a question in there?
Sure.
And I'm not sure that Quentin is joining us. We have been unable to find him. But at
Okay.
any rate, I do have a question for you. How it sounds like, you know, did you go out actively to ONR and the Naval Postgraduate School to try to tell them about your technology? How did you become aware of the need?
Right. So initially, as I mentioned, we heard about that this application was being developed from the national lab, from Dr. Bensby, who was at Brookhaven, and he was involved in because he was an expert in this area. He was involved in the Navy's program as well as an advisor, and because the big national labs were all involved in it, so they were contributing, and he knew about our technology, and he thought, well, you know, there's some advantages to this technology over what's being discussed. So he suggested that we reach out to the Navy and then the Joint Technology Office. So we did. And then we had to go and build a relationship with both Quentin and Sarwat, and then the people at JTO and the people at the Naval Postgraduate School, because NPS was doing a lot of the research on the particular area that we were working on. We ended up working with several different labs over the course of the 4 years that we were part of that program. We worked with, you know, several of the different national labs: Jefferson Lab, Brookhaven, Los Alamos, and in particular. And so, you know, we had to keep building relationships with all these different labs. And I think there was a warning earlier today too, and before it loses, or it escapes my thought here, is one of the challenges is this program was going very strong, and then the Admiral retired. Right. And I remember Arden was saying, you know, the champion disappeared, right? Or there was a change.
The management, the management changed.
Yeah, the management changed, and so that happened to us. And so we were going along, you know, with as much work as we could handle, and then all of a sudden it came basically to a screeching halt as the management changed, the priority changed, and our program wound down very quickly. So that's another warning anytime that you're working with, in particular in defense, if you're still in the early stages. Now, once you're into a program of record, it's those programs of record tend to keep going. They're not as volatile as some of the earlier stage, because as I mentioned,
it's hard to get it. It takes years though to get
right.
that.
Well, that's right.
Yeah,
that's the challenge. That's the flip side of that challenge is you might be able to get into it easier, but it can disappear overnight. And so, but once you get into a program of record, then it's going to be more stable, but it's going to be harder to get into that program record because they've already got a solution, and it's going to be hard to
to bump it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if you have a better solution, I have seen, since Quentin isn't on here, I have seen that a better solution comes along after they already have one going through the process, and that better solution doesn't often bump out what's in there because it's already there. It's gone through all the requirements. So
Yeah.
that is important to keep in mind if you're working with the military, with defense. A couple of things though that you have said that I keep hearing reiterated. So you had an internal DOE champion too. It sounds like at Brookhaven, who told you about what was going on and what was being worked on so that you could then pursue that opportunity. And then just the importance of relationships. We have a lot of people in the chat that are saying, well, how do I become involved? How do I find out if there is an opportunity for phase 3? Well, it really seems like it comes down to that relationship, as Manny mentioned, with your program manager, but also just continuing to build the relationships as you had to do at the Navy postgraduate school and with ONR.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've learned is that one of the mistakes I see a lot of times people make, people meaning small businesses, is they think, well, working with the government is like this big faceless, big bureaucracy that I'll never be able to, get a foot into or get the door opened. But that's not true at all. I mean, there's people that work at DOD and at DOE are real people. There's no difference. It's just like any other customer development efforts. You got to reach out. You got to, get to know people. You got to show what your value proposition is. But it's no different at the government than it is if you were talking to industry,
commercial,
whether it was
right.
a prime contractor or just it's no different. And I think a lot of people think it's different. There are some rules that, acquisition rules that are important. And, we've heard all those today. But it's at the basic element, there's no difference in trying to, build relationships within the government than it is with a commercial.
Right.
And so it's important. And so we did that. We went to conferences, we went to these meetings, and then we figure out a way to invite ourselves or get invited to go to these meetings and just show what our technology could do and then do some small demonstrations. And it took a lot of effort. And so I think those are things that are going to apply regardless of whatever the scenario is or the situation is. Again, some of the other things that we did specifically to ours was we got our once we started figuring out what the where the different interested groups were at the Navy, we then had to work on the budget end of it. And they're constrained by their budget cycle. And so they can't just add money because they want to add technology. They have to find it from somewhere else. And so what we did is we engaged quite a bit with our congressional delegation. And thankfully we were lucky enough at the time that we had a pretty influential senator and congressperson that was able to help us with funding. And so that was certainly helpful. That doesn't always match up, but it certainly is helpful at DOD. And so that was a part of our strategy, and that was a part of what helped us for a time. And then the Admiral retired and priorities changed and the program wound down. But throughout that process, because the technology had this underpinning from the DOE, it gave us from the SBIR program.
Right.
It provided a lot of the like the first contract that we had with the Naval Postgraduate School was a sole source contract because it was based on the technology that was developed under the SBIR program. They were able to do a justification for other than full and open competition that allowed us to get that contract.
Right. And I think in general, DOD is is more knowledgeable on phase 3, but just because they are going to be their own customer. Like
Right.
that's kind of their thing with SBIR. We're developing this, or we need this. We know our warfighter needs it, so we are going to be your customer. So that kind of takes that piece of the puzzle out of it, which is not necessarily going to be the case with DOE, and in most cases is not going to be the case. I know we have our roundtable discussion folks on here, so I'm going to go ahead and cue them up. But Jerry, any last words of advice?
Don't give up.
I already used that one.
I mean, seriously, I mean, it's just hard work, but it's
Right.
fun work. And it's just like any other, building any other relationship.
Yeah, I agree. So thank you very much, Jerry. And thank you for telling us all about it. I did have one final question for you, and what is the difference between a POM and a, program of record and a program of memorandum? Does the POM come before?
That's my understanding.
Okay, okay.
The POM is then a foundation for them, the program of record is
Okay.
based on that. That's my understanding of it. But
Okay, so but the ultimate goal, if you're going to do work with DoD, would be to hopefully get it associated with a program of record.
if you can, sure, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, because
Yeah.
then they go on for years.
Right,
I think around how long that M1 Abrams has been around.
Right.
Yes, there's also these iterations of it. F-35 is going to be around for a while.
right. Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much, Jerry.
You're
I'll have to
welcome.
go see what happened to Quentin.
Good question.
Anyway, thank you. All right, so I know we have Richard here. I checked and I'm pretty sure we have everyone else here. We should also have John. I saw, yep, there's John and Izar. I know I saw Izar in here as well. He starts as Nalu. He's in the ins under participants, not under the eyes, but I saw him there.
Carolee needs to turn his camera on.
Oh, okay, okay. Izar, can you turn your camera on? Maybe he can't do that. So at any rate, I just wanted to open the floor. I did interview quite a few people, and you guys, I think, had a lot to add to the conversation in terms of your efforts in getting phase 3 from the government, whether it is POs or whether it is an actual phase 3 contract with your data rights continuing through it. So I'm going to do it in the same fashion, only I don't have your program manager here or your CO that you worked with. So Richard, why don't we start with you? Just give a little bit of background on Applied Nanotech and how you worked through the process, because I think you were telling me the story about where it took so long to get the need to actually get to the national lab or to the Michigan State that they had forgotten there was ever an SBIR award that was involved with it. So why don't you tell your story a little bit?
Sure, thank you. I'm with Applied Nanotech. Well, first, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, you are a little low. I don't know if you can turn your volume up at all, but we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, I apologize. I don't have that. Let's see, can I turn that up?
Actually, you're great. You're great
Okay.
now. You're speaking louder. You're fine.
Okay. So I'm with Applied Nanotech. We are based in Austin, Texas. We're a small, at this point, we're 5 people company. So about 10 years ago, or even late or earlier, we won a phase 1 and a phase 2 to build stripper foils for the facility for rare ion beam at Michigan State University. This was through nuclear science or nuclear physics. So just another background. So DOE, does tee up some of the issues that they're going to face in building these reactors. So or machines, these instruments that may take years. And so they don't necessarily have all the answers in front of them when they start building the rare iron facility for rare iron beam, or a lot of other facilities. So these things are kind of work in progress. We have developed a carbon-based stripper foil that can be for small diameter or large diameter applications. We went through a phase 1 and a phase 2, and we were able to commercialize this material through sales to other people that have cyclotron reactors or cyclotron accelerators. And there are a few of them out there. Most of the people that have cyclotron accelerators use them for making radioactive pharmaceuticals. So there's probably a cyclotron accelerator near you. At this point, you may not know it. These things are not advertised, but they do exist, and it's a good market. It's a good market for a small company like ours. Long story short, about 10 years later, I started hearing from Michigan State University, "Hey, do you have stripper foils?" Yes, we do. What configuration do you need? I responded to them. About a week or two later, I got a response from a buyer, which essentially was a request for a quote. And it looks like they were going out for bids on this product that was developed under an SBIR program. So I responded to their request for a bid. I submitted that, and I said, and by the way, this was done under an SBIR program, and I gave them the award number and things like that, so they could go back and look. Obviously, the buyer was not aware of this. And when I sent this message, I also copied, I think I copied Manny and maybe one or two other people in the DOE office, just to kind of let them know of the conversation that was happening here. I eventually did sell foils to them. I'm not sure what the conversation was behind the scenes, if there was discussion between Manny or others in the SBIR office and the buyer. But I guess the story that I want to say is, yes, there can be a long time between when you do your SBIR program and you develop the product and when this particular product is needed at a facility that was developed for. So number one, you need other markets that will carry you to the point where you can start selling to DOE. They're not necessarily going to be your best customer, but they are a good customer. And you do have to assert yourself because the people you're working with don't necessarily understand the situation, don't understand that you were an SBIR recipient. They don't have a record of that. And the people I was working with at Michigan State may have already retired. So you have to push and assert your rights. And you have to understand your rights and basically assert them. And it worked out for me.
You, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I have worked with a lot of companies through the years. Do you have work with DoD as well, or no?
Yes, I do have
Okay.
DoD programs as well.
Right. So I'm wondering if that helped you be assertive, with saying that this is, this should be phase 3. It doesn't need to go out for competitive bid or.
No, I don't think that necessarily.
Okay.
Working with DoD, gives you this sense of being assertive or the understanding that you need to be assertive. I just recognize that, okay, here's a situation where, okay, I need to explain,
Mhm.
educate. I wouldn't say demand is a word I would use, but inform
Mhm.
of the situation. So I, you know,
Okay.
you don't have to
I
be nasty about it. Just
Right. No, I just, the reason I asked the question is I know that because DoD does so many phase threes, that's what I meant by it, that, you know, you were
oh,
used
I
to
understand.
working with them.
Yeah.
And so you knew that as background going into it. Where a lot of our companies that have DOE funding aren't necessarily as familiar with DoD. So that was really what I meant by that. Sorry, I didn't say it exactly the way that I meant it. But thank you. I'm going to let Jonathan come on and talk about your scenario. I think it's a little bit similar, but go ahead and tell us about it.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Jonathan Edelin. I work at Radiosoft. We're a software company based in Boulder, Colorado. We do mainly computational physics for particle accelerators, RF controls, machine learning, accelerator controls, things of that nature. So we have a pretty long history of working with national labs on SBIR projects to prototype either a new computational algorithm for improving beam dynamics software, or recently building new control, machine learning based control algorithms for various different beamline control problems or anomaly detection, things like that. And I think we've seen over the past few years, especially, that we've been able to start contracting with labs after SBIRs. I think one of the things that I think we've struggled with a little bit in terms of phase 3 funding is that what we're getting is technically a phase 3, but we're not actually going through the phase 3 process with the labs. And part of that is just our own education and our own sort of, you get used to doing things a certain way, and you're not always thinking, oh, this should be a phase 3. I should be seeing how I can get a phase 3 from this, or just sort of like, oh, we need to get a contract and, you know, try to do some work for some people, or somebody approaches us and says they want to do something on a contract, and we say, yes, we can do that for you. It's not always immediately clear, oh, yes, that should be a phase 3. Like, I've got a good example right now. We're doing some machine learning control work for Fermilab on a contract, and that was stuck in sole source justification for a while. It didn't need to be that. It was definitely could have been a phase 3. So that's a clear example where we really should have done a phase 3 contract and not just done a regular contract. We've got a few of those. That's not a unique situation. And another one was, we had a phase 1 that didn't go to phase 2, but the lab wanted us to continue doing the work to sort of get to a full demonstration, and then they ended up contracting with us directly to do the demonstration. And that definitely could have been a phase 3 contract. But because I think, especially because it was just out of a phase 1, nobody was thinking, oh, that's a phase 3, even though a phase 3 could be from a phase 1. So.
Right. So in terms of lessons learned, I think, you know, it sounds to me like a lot of it is just getting the word out more about what phase 3 is all about, particularly with the contracting officers and also with the PMs, just using them and making sure that they're gonna be your internal champion.
Yeah, I also think that, like, knowing if we have, I mean, obviously, you know, some of the stuff's written into the SBIR program and all of that, but, you know, and there's the memos and the guidance and all of that, but I guess having very clear, this is the document you want to point to when talking to a contracting officer about a phase 3, and that we can say, this is a very firm, you know, document that says legally they don't have to do the sole source justification because it's a follow-on from an SBIR. I think making sure we know where those resources are would be very helpful.
Right. And I did put the link to the memo in the chat box.
Yep.
But also I agree. And I think that Manny and I have been talking about this already, that we need to put some more documentation in place that maybe is something that can be utilized on both sides, by the small business, but also by the contracting officer. I see. Izar, you are here now. Would you like to just speak a little bit to your company and your technology and how you have tried to use phase threes?
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, just fine.
Great. Thanks. Thanks for having me. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces from both DOE and the colleagues at companies. My name is Isar Mustafanejad, founder and CEO at Nalu Scientific. We're in Honolulu, Hawaii. We design, fabricate, and develop high-speed integrated circuits, mainly for use in national labs, high energy physics, nuclear physics, astroparticle physics type experiments. So we're more on the detector side and of the lab activities compared to the machine side that we heard from several of the companies working in the accelerator programs here. Yeah, we've been getting, we got our start with the DOE phase 1 and then phase 2, and then we had variations of our technology being funded through the phase 1 and 2 programs within the DOE, and eventually talking to, so our story is still evolving as we speak. Long ways to go for us has been that, similar to many others that I've mentioned, really talking to scientists and end users within the labs, engineers and scientists, and just talk to as many of them as possible, meet them at conferences and events, either DOE events or just scientific conferences. And through that process, they became kind of familiar with what our tech could bring to the plate for them in their R&D efforts or in their building efforts or activities. And gradually they started asking questions. Well, can you modify it this way? Can you, now that you have this microchip, can you put it on a printed circuit board that's form factor friendly for us? And so those kind of evolved into small purchase orders from the labs, both NNSA funded labs and kind of the Office of Science labs. And gradually we started kind of doing, we took a phased approach with a lot of those. First they funded, designed a schematic and layout for it, and then they would go back. It would take a year, and next funding cycle they would come back and say, okay, well, can you build it now? And kind of one thing to the next. And now we've had several of those POs, I'm happy to say. So it's been very organic for us, finding those champions within the lab that are able to see the value that we can bring to the table on the technical side, and eventually go get their budget from the places that they need to get. So it's a lot slower than one would like it to be. But yeah, so we've some of those are faster. Some of the labs operate a lot faster. They're used to buying stuff, and their contracting official COs are just used to seeing their scientists and engineers buy things, just because they have a bigger budget, and they also are building a lot of things all the time. So those operations have happened faster, I must say. So we're fortunate to be working with some of those labs also. And I learned a lot through this today's meeting, knowing that the data rights actually propagate through the phase 3 is very interesting, and so we'll make sure to follow up on that. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that is a big benefit and one of the big reasons to make sure it gets put in place that way so that it extends them. But I think you also, when we spoke, you also mentioned the fact that a lot of your POs are for less than 250K. And so those don't have to be put out for competition anyway. And so so that probably helps you a lot too with that.
Yes. So we the types of work that we do, we have been able to so far perform and be able to deliver under those numbers. Moving forward, though, there will be opportunities for bigger numbers. So yeah.
Right. So these were some of the takeaways that I have heard so far, and I just want to make sure that I didn't miss any. So I'll let all three of you can come back and tell me if I've missed something important here. But I think urgent need, there has to be someone that needs it. We need to educate people on what a phase 3 is and what it means. You need an internal champion. Because that's important. People change, and they change often. and that there can often be, and Katie kind of made reference to this, that there can be a long gap between when the SBIR actually occurred and when you're actually trying to get a phase 3. As Richard mentioned, he had to spend some time going back and showing that it did come from an SBIR. But I think the biggest piece is how important relationships are, just in the whole process of selling. Don't know if you have any other words of wisdom that you want to throw out there, you guys.
Well, I think the biggest word of wisdom was somebody mentioned that your program manager is, you know, your champion on the inside. And that's the relationship that is probably the most important.
Right.
They have visibility to things that you just don't have that visibility.
Right. Izar or Jonathan, anything you want to add?
My only addition to that is that, you know, if you're doing anything with collaborators at the lab, like you have a subcontract to a lab and they're working with you to help develop the product, but they're also, that's a good segue into sort of continuing to build that relationship, right? They're gonna know what's going on, who the decision makers are, that can actually do the purchasing and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Great.
Yeah, one thing I learned, that's a great point, Jonathan, actually, that happened to us a lot. Another thing that Richard also mentioned is the long cycle times. Don't write it off just because you did something 10 years ago. Now we have not in business that long, so I hope it doesn't take that long, but we're working now on projects that their SBIR phase 2s essentially ended in 2020, and now they're getting traction. So luckily we were able to keep the expertise and the know-how and also the hardware and software in place, and also even grow them to make them better because they're all in line with the rest of our business line. So we're able to be responsive. So keep things on the shelf, essentially. Don't throw them in the dumpster yet.
Right. Always keep your eyes open for opportunities. So thank you three very much. I really appreciate you coming on and closing out our session here. But I'm going to tell people don't go away yet, because we have some important things that we're still going to discuss here just quickly. Let's see, there was a couple of questions that keep coming back up, and so I just want to make a statement here, just to let people know that it wasn't that I was ignoring your question. In fact, I was talking to people offline to see if there was anything more I could add about it. And it has to do with a procurement vehicle. So I think, Marcus, you have references that you're making, you know, the rumors that you say that there might be something coming. So right now it looks like there's nothing to really talk about there. But I agree, that would make it potentially easier. So just quickly, I know we've been on the Zoom call for a while now. We've heard a lot of interesting pieces of information, but I just wanted to quickly update where we are with different partnering activities. So I think we've all come to the conclusion, and we now all accept, that you're going to need partners to successfully commercialize. And it sounds like you even need a good internal champion at DOE to successfully get a phase 3 as well. So you're definitely going to need partners and strategic relationships to move your technology forward. Along those lines, we have put in place some phase 2 awardee events. Obviously, the one that you're attending today is one of those. Those are the quarterly commercialization workshops. We have now had 4 of them. I put the link down at the bottom, and if you go there, you can find recordings to them and slides, the slide decks. We have one more coming up on December 12th. So it's going to be December 12th, and it is on licensing. So if you have questions about licensing, please sign up to come to that workshop. I will be posting that in probably a couple of months. It'll come out in November, and I will make sure I send all of the active phase 2s a link to go ahead and register, but you can always find information on the phase 2 awardee events page. Also, many of you that are on the workshop today. You participated in the virtual partner pitch program that was held throughout May and April and August and September. 97 of you participated. I had about 200 and some different stakeholders registered to participate in the pitches. We had 14 different pitch sessions that were organized by topic areas. And there is the DOE disclaimer that it's no guarantee of stakeholder interest or participation, and I'm not endorsing the stakeholders. They're unvetted. But I think we did see some activity here, and it will be a program that is continuing in FY24, and the applications for that will open in January. And again, there'll be a couple of things that you need to respond to on the application, but mainly you have to have an active DOE phase 2. And then that actually feeds into a larger partnering initiative that I have pretty much been working on for almost 2 years now. But it is the SBIR partnering platform, and it is a public-facing, self-supporting, searchable database. And I am in the very near stages of getting it completely released now. The objective was that it was going to provide a repository where you all, the applicants and awardees, which we are calling innovators, can find potential partners. And then on the flip side, the partners can access 1,000+ vetted technologies. So if you have a phase 2 award or a phase 1 award, your award information has already been ported into the database. And then once it is open, I will be sending you all a note telling you to come and onboard. You'll be asked to check out your abstract, update it if you want to. There are pieces in there about what types of partners you're looking for, what the TRL level is, anything specific that you would like to put in about the technology. I also will tell you that it allows you to look for funding opportunities. So when our topic documents are released, they are input into it, and you can search by keyword. It also uses AI. The other piece that is very interesting about it is that you can actually search other agencies as well. So, obviously our focus is on getting you to apply for DOE, but it will also provide you with similar opportunities in other agencies. And then it will just be a general resource for news feeds, and also all the resources that I have on the partnering pages have been moved over to this page as well. And so again, I know Eileen put her contact information up. Here is my contact information as well. We are always interested in your feedback on ways to help us improve the programs, as well as your interest in your individual partnering needs. I will just close by saying that earlier this week, I was in Houston at the Chemical Ventures Conference, and I had the opportunity to speak to many of the large oil and gas providers, and they're very excited about the partnering platform and also about the pitch program, and are really looking for clean technologies. So I think we've got a lot that's going on in this arena right now, and we are generating a lot of excitement about the partnering programs we have. So with that, I will go ahead and close out. I think there are some questions in here. Eileen, if you are still here. Oh, I see you said to reach out to them, but if you want to answer any of those, feel free to. Otherwise, thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Thank you to our panelists and our speakers, and I will be making sure that the presentations and the recording are made available. So Eileen, do you need to or want to answer any of these? Otherwise, I'll close out the meeting. Maybe you did answer them.
I think I answered
Yeah.
everything.
Right.
Except the question about why it's not available until the second summer of the phase 2.
Oh.
And I don't know, maybe Manny could answer that question, not to put you on the spot, Manny, but I wasn't here when the diversity supplement was defined. I have gotten that question a couple of times in the past.
It has to do with the timing in terms of when they would apply. And I think yeah, I think it was a timing issue in terms of being able to do that. I forgot the specific details, but it is limited to the second summer.
And thank you. And I also see that a phase 2, which has no cost extension of ongoing phase, apply for a diversity supplement. Just why don't you go ahead and send me an email about your specific situation, and we can take that discussion offline.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. Really appreciate you participating in this, and look forward to talking to you all more about this. Thank you.